Bonjour à toutes et à tous, je suis Kamel Mouhoubi, je m'occupe de l'offre cybersécurité et réseau chez MIEL et je suis également en charge des innovations qu'on ajoute régulièrement à notre portfolio. Alors, nous avons aujourd'hui un invité très prestigieux, un invité qui va essayer de nous éclairer sur la définition authentique d'un concept qui, bien qu'il soit très utilisé aujourd'hui, génère encore beaucoup de confusion. Ce concept, c'est le zéro trust. On va d'ailleurs regarder ce que nous apprend vraiment la définition officielle du zéro trust, la zéro confiance, qui contient normalement dans ces termes sa définition avec une idée principale, celle de n'accorder théoriquement aucune confiance, implicite, explicite, en tout cas de n'autoriser un accès à un utilisateur ou à une machine qu'en ayant vérifié en continu les identités, la légitimité, la forme, etc., avec un objectif qui est simple, empêcher une cyberattaque de réussir. Cette vision représente aussi les concepts fondamentaux de Illumio, la solution de segmentation zéro trust que nous allons également évoquer aujourd'hui. Après avoir donc illustré ce concept, on va aussi essayer de comprendre pourquoi la segmentation dans un système d'information et la méthode pour pouvoir l'opérer se doit d'être définie par une approche zéro trust. Ce passage d'un concept à un modèle, puis d'un modèle à une stratégie, c'est un voyage de 15 ans qui a été commencé par un homme, à l'époque analyste forester, et qui est aujourd'hui notre invité, John Kindervag. So, good morning, John.
Hey, thank you for having me.
We are very happy to have you on board and honored to be able to speak with you today.
Yes, it's good to be here in Paris.
Thank you. So, alors, John est aujourd'hui Chief Evangelist chez Illumio, où il explique notamment d'abord que le Zero Trust est beaucoup plus une philosophie, un parcours qu'un simple projet, mais où il explique aussi que s'il a rejoint Illumio, c'est que cette philosophie se concrétise et se consomme facilement avec cette solution. On va commencer directement avec les questions. Je vais les poser en français et en anglais, et on écoutera bien sûr attentivement les réponses de John. Alors, on va commencer par la première question. En 2010, vous avez rédigé et codifié certains principes, puis développé un nouveau modèle qu'on appelle le Zero Trust. 14 ans plus tard, ce modèle s'est devenu une stratégie adoptée par de nombreuses entreprises et une recommandation de presque toutes les agences nationales de sécurité. Par contre, on constate qu'il y a encore beaucoup de confusion autour du Zero Trust. Comment est-ce que vous définirez clairement la confiance zéro authentique? So, John, back in 2010, you wrote and codified some principles and developed a new model called Zero Trust. And something like 14 or 15 years later, it became a strategy adopted by many companies and a recommendation given by almost all governments. However, at least here in France, we can still see a lot of confusion around Zero Trust. So how would you clearly define authentic Zero Trust?
So, Zero Trust is something that has been given a lot of definitions by a lot of different people, typically based upon the products they're selling. So I'm going to elevate above that and talk to you about what Zero Trust really is. So Zero Trust, first and foremost, is a strategy. It's not something that you buy, it's something that you do. And it's a strategy designed to achieve specific objectives. So all strategies are big ideas designed to achieve specific objectives. And this specific objective we're trying to do is twofold. One is we want to stop data breaches. Now, we have to ask the question, what's a data breach? And we used to say a breach is when somebody got into our networks and they started looking around, right? They've breached our network. But that definition has changed, and it's been changed by legal and regulatory entities. Here in Europe, you have GDPR.
Yeah.
All legal and regulatory entities say that a breach occurs when data that is sensitive or regulated has been exfiltrated from our networks or systems into the hands of malicious actors. You see, our industry is very focused on what's coming in, but not what's focused on going out. And what's going out is of primary importance because that's where we get really in big trouble. That's when the breach happens. That's when the regulators get on our case. That's when CEOs get fired. So we want to stop data breaches, and we can do that using Zero Trust. And then we can make other cyber attacks unsuccessful. So the way we do that is we use the zero trust principles to stop the cyber attack when it starts, because we can't stop it from starting. We'd have to be the attacker, right? But we can make it unsuccessful. So there's only two types of attacks: successful ones and unsuccessful ones. The ones that we want to deal with are the unsuccessful ones, not the successful ones. And we do, and again, zero trust does that because it eliminates trust. And trust is a human emotion that's been injected into digital systems for absolutely no reason. And that's why I've been advocating for eliminating it, because it serves no purpose for us in digital systems. Every single security incident, well, probably most every single one, I guess. You know, I haven't done an exhaustive study, but most security incidents, when you break them down, you will see that they are fundamentally an exploitation of a broken trust model. So we want to get rid of the idea that we have trusted and untrusted systems, and that determines policy. We want to eliminate trust, get rid of it.
Okay, thank you very much. So, obviously, you are able to talk about, during days, about those principles. Vous pouvez parler pendant des jours des concepts du zero trust, mais par contre, je pense que vous avez un très bon exemple visuel des schémas de pensée typiques qui conduisent au zero trust. So, I think you have you can show us a very good visual example of the design thinking and the system thinking of that would lead to zero trust. Could you please detail us this analogy?
Yeah, this analogy is about how the U.S. Secret Service protects the President of the United States. And if you notice here, I'm wearing a Secret Service pin. Ooh, it's upside down. Yeah. Here, we got to turn him right side up here above Pooh. Because Pooh is my spirit animal. Winnie the Pooh is my spirit animal, so I keep him. But I get a lot of Secret Service agents at my speeches, and so they give me these Secret Service pins. So I typically wear one, to honor what they do. And so the Secret Service, when they're protecting the President of the United States, they know three things about the President that we typically don't know about the data or assets we're protecting. First of all, they know who the President is. They don't do presidential discovery projects, right? They don't scan for the President. Secondly, they know where the President is at all times. They never go, hey, have you seen the President? We've lost the President. Where is he? That doesn't happen.
No.
And third, they know who should have access to the President at any given time. Now, these are the three fundamental questions that you must ask whether you're protecting the President of the United States, data, assets, I don't know, the Prime Minister of France. It doesn't matter. It's all the same concept. So these are the three things that you must know whether you're protecting data, assets, or the President of the United States. It doesn't matter. The concepts are all the same. And so the best visual example comes from an image I found of President Barack Obama's 2009 inauguration parade. And you can see on the screen here that he does have a perimeter. People like to point that out, but I do show that, yes, look, this Secret Service agent at the top of the screen here, the top right-hand side, he has his hands in his pockets. He has his hat on. Looks like a warm hat, too, with the earmuffs and everything. And he's got his coat zipped up. Well, why is that? Because it's cold outside. It's January in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you've ever been to Washington, D.C. in January, but it's really chilly. Yeah, it's cold. It's cold. Yeah. So they're not there to do any real protection. They're there as security theater, right? They're there to intimidate. Don't cross this line. But the real security is being done at the bottom of the screen. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see an image that I call the protect surface. Now, the protect surface is the fundamental tactical concept of zero trust. You must understand what a protect surface is in order to understand zero trust, because it won't make any sense without that. So the protect surface is the opposite of the attack surface. Other people worry about managing the attack surface, and I would argue that the attack surface is unmanageable. It's like the universe. It's constantly expanding. How do you manage the universe? You don't. But what you can do is you can invert the problem and shrink it down orders of magnitude to something very small and easily known, and we call this the protect surface. So the Secret Service understands the protect surface. And on this day in January, there were only 4 individuals in the protect surface. the president, his wife, and his 2 daughters. If at the end of the day, those 4 people are left alive, the Secret Service has done their job, right? That's what they're worried about, protecting those 4 individuals. Now, because they understand what they need to protect, which in cybersecurity, that's our job, right? We're supposed to secure cybers, although we don't know what a cyber is.
Yeah.
Remember back when it was information security when we were much younger and we both had hair?
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to. That was probably inappropriate there.
No,
but
it wasn't.
but you know, we knew we were protecting information. We knew what we were protecting. Now we're protecting cybers. So we've kind of abstracted what we're actually doing for our business. But we have to imagine that there's data, assets, and other things that we need to protect. So the Secret Service, because they know what they need to protect, they're going to do something quite remarkable. And so if you see the image, you can see that they've moved their controls adjacent to the protect surface. Get them as close as possible as they can possibly put them. And this defines a microperimeter in policy that segments the president and his family away from everything else in Washington, D.C. They're not trying to protect all of Washington, D.C. They're not trying to protect everybody in the audience. They're not trying to protect everybody in the motorcade. They're protecting those 4 people. And so by understanding that, they can do something that we can't do, which is control access to that microperimeter. You see, what we do right now in cybersecurity is put our controls on the perimeter or on the endpoint, which are as far away as we can possibly put them from the thing we're trying to protect. And this creates a secondary attack surface for our attackers that we call the internal network. And because of that, we end up with dwell time, right? Okay. And everybody's familiar with dwell time. The idea that attackers have been in our environment for days, weeks, months, years, sometimes even decades, and we didn't notice they were there. And they're almost never discovered by the party who's being attacked. They're discovered by a third party somehow. And so Zero Trust eliminates dwell time. There's no place to hide because we have this complete visibility of what is trying to access these sensitive resources. So this is what is happening with the president and the protection detail, or what's known as EP, executive protection. And so now we can look at the policy. And Zero Trust and all cybersecurity comes down to policy. Really, that's all it is. We're making policy statements. Now, if there is a bad thing that happens in an environment, there is a policy statement that allowed it to happen. Mm-hmm. I have a saying that all bad things happen inside the allow rule, right? If you have something bad that happens to you, there is a rule that allowed it to happen. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's true. We're not victims of cybercrime in our business. We are, at best, unwitting co-conspirators because we have bad policy statements. Yeah. So with policy, all you can do is allow or deny. In Zero Trust, we start with a deny all policy, and then we turn on granular allow rules based upon somebody's need to get access to something to do their job. So at this moment, you can see there are 2 individuals in this image of people who can transit outbound of the microperimeter. These 2 Secret Service agents who are driving the vehicle. It's an armored vehicle known as the Beast. And then there are 0 people who are allowed to come back in at this point. So you can see here that there's a Secret Service agent at the bottom of the screen. Notice the difference here. He doesn't have his hands in his pockets. Doesn't even have gloves on. No hat on. Coat is not buttoned. Now, it's not because it's warmer down at the bottom of the screen than it is up at the top. It's because this person has a real job to do, a real protective job. So if somebody tries to come in to the microperimeter and get access to the president at this moment, they will violently stop that and enforce that deny rule at this moment. So this is what's happening, in the executive protection. No one can get access to the president. Now, the Secret Service doesn't stop there. They continuously monitor and update in real time. So they get threat intelligence by looking out in the crowd. This guy in white, I always pick on him just because he stands out in this image, but they tell their command and control who gets the message to the controls to keep an eye out for the guy in white. And the other thing that they can do is they can change policy dynamically. So they get a message, an important person needs to come in and get access to the president. And they can then change and add an allow rule dynamically on a need-to-know basis. And this is a zero trust model of executive protection. But this is how you protect anything. Data, assets, or the President of the United States. We've had a broken model of protection in cybersecurity because, we had these concepts, of perimeter-based security that came because we had networks long before we ever had the need to secure those networks. So it was always an overlay. It was always an afterthought. In executive protection, understanding who you're protecting, what is known as the protectee, is super important. That needs to transfer over into cybersecurity. What are you protecting? Data, assets? You need to figure that out.
Okay, that's a real impressive illustration of the concept, really. Alors, on comprend maintenant qu'il s'agit d'une stratégie et d'un parcours. Et du coup, quelle devrait être, selon vous, la méthodologie ou les étapes de ce voyage? So, we do understand now that it's a strategy and a journey. So, according to you, what should be the methodology or the steps of this journey?
Yeah, so I was very lucky. I get asked this a lot. Are you angry or upset that Zero Trust didn't take off very quickly early on? Because when I first came out with the idea, people actually made fun of me to my face. They would walk up to me and tell me that I was insane. And maybe I was insane, but I was also determined. And so I had this great gift given to me where for a number of years, I was really the only person in the world doing Zero Trust, leading Zero Trust deployments. And so I got to make all these mistakes that you and your clients don't have to make now because I was able to codify them in a methodology. So it's a simple methodology. It's called the 5-step methodology. So you can infer from that there are 5 things that you need to do. I try to keep everything simple. A lot of people try to make things complicated. I've read so far the 82 steps to Zero Trust. I read another one, the 91 steps. Like, where are you getting all this stuff from? It's not that hard. So I want to make things very simple and consumable. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define that protect surface. We're going to ask that question, what do you need to protect? All the time people call me up and they say, hey, John, I just bought product X or product Y. What do I do with it? I say, I don't know. I say, well, you better know. You're the creator of Zero Trust. How come you can't know this thing? Well, what are you trying to protect? I don't know what you're going to do with it. And they say, well, we haven't thought about that yet. Well, then you're going to not be successful. So you have to know what you're going to protect. Now, then the next question is, well, what should we protect? And this is an acronym I came up with a number of years ago. It's called a DAS element. It stands for data that is sensitive, applications that are sensitive, assets that are sensitive, or services that are sensitive. We're not going to protect everything. We're going to protect the things that are sensitive, right? And you can see this documented. It's in the NSTAC report, the President's National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee. There was a subcommittee on Zero Trust. I was appointed by President Biden to serve on that committee, to brief that committee, and to be one of the primary authors of that document. And so you can see all that outlined there. And so now we take a single DAS element and we put it into a single protect surface so that we're building out our Zero Trust environment one protect surface at a time. Once we know what we're protecting, then we are going to map the transaction flows. How does the system work together as a system? You see, I learned this the hard way too. One time I was working on a point of sale system, putting it into a Zero Trust environment. And one night, unbeknownst to any of us who were working on this, somebody pulled out a server because it was old. That's an old server. Well, they're going to pull it out. Well, that server was integral to the point of sale service working. And so 3,000 or 4,000 stores internationally, restaurants internationally were brought down, just like that. Why? Because the guy thought it was old. He didn't know how it worked. And so this is one of the reasons that I came to Illumio, because I need the visibility to understand how the system works together as a system, and Illumio gives me that visibility. Once I have the visibility, it will show me where I need to put the controls. It's quite magical. Step 2 is magical, because you will look at that and you go, oh, I need a control there, I need a control there, I need a control there. And it will, because you're understanding the type of transaction flow, you'll understand, oh, I need a firewall here, I need an email gateway here, I need this kind of security tool here. It will show you all that. It will reveal itself to you once you start pulling it apart and seeing how it works. And so once I know that, then I can architect the environment. You see, traditionally, back when you and I were tadpoles in the primordial soup of cybersecurity, when it was a very new business, we started with reference architectures that were given to us by vendors, right? And we then implemented that reference architecture, and then we turned it over to the business, and we said, hey, here you go, here's your security stuff, and the business would go, well, that's wonderful, thank you for doing that, but we have square pegs and you've given us round holes. What do we do with that? And we go, well, luckily the vendor has given us a free whittling knife. Here you go. You make it fit. Well, Zero Trust is tailor-made for every single protect surface. The architecture is tailor-made. I can't give you this overarching thing to tell you how to do it for every scenario with all these reference architectures. People are trying to do that. I think it's a fool's errand, but whatever, they're free to do that. But it's much easier to make it according to the protect surface, right? I mean, I'm wearing a custom-made blazer where somebody came and took my measurements, right? And then they kind of got it all tacked up, and then they put it on me and they fitted it. And it fits much better than if I bought a suit off the rack at the department store, right? Because it's custom-made for me. It won't fit everybody else, but it will fit me. By the way, it's got a cool lining, don't you think? Look at that, the American flag, okay? So then once we do that, then we instantiate policy, we create policy. Everything, again, comes down to policy. We just need controls that enforce policy. That's the purpose of controls, to enforce policy or rules. So Zero Trust has a very simple way of doing it. It's called the Kipling method. This is my personal homage to the writer Rudyard Kipling, who gave us the idea of who, what, when, where, why, and how in a poem in 1902. So who should have access via what application? When should that access be allowed? And we need to restrict access so that the rules aren't in force or turned on when people aren't typically accessing that rule, because that's when the attackers will try to use that same rule. And then where is that protect surface located? Why are we doing it? This is where we inject a lot of metadata into the packet that we can read in our analytics tools, our AI, to help us analyze what's going on in the packet. And then finally, how are we looking at that packet to make sure that it's validated, that it's good? And so once we do that, then we can move into the fifth step, which is monitor and maintain. So we take all the telemetry that we're gaining from this system and we re-inject it back into the system. And this creates what's known as an anti-fragile system. So a lot of people today are talking about, resilience. Yeah. And resilience is fairly static. So resilience is fine, but we can go beyond resilience in Zero Trust to anti-fragility. And I got the vocabulary to talk about this from the writer Nissim Nicholas Taleb, who wrote the book Black Swan, right? And he wrote a book called Anti-Fragile as well. And he talked about systems that gain from stress, from stressors. So attacks, load. So when you're attacking a system, you can learn a lot about the system. And so this is true. He gives the example of the human body in his book. So when I go on vacation, I sit by the beach, have too many Mai Tais and pina coladas and overindulge myself on the buffet, I go home, I've gained a few extra pounds. What do I have to do to get rid of them? Well, I have to stress my body out, don't I? I have to restrict calories. That's a stressor. I have to, lift weights or run or exercise or do something. I put all these stresses on my body, but my body doesn't break down. It adapts and gets stronger. And this is what we can do in our security systems as well. We can make them adapt to the stressors and get stronger and stronger over time. So Zero Trust then is an anti-fragile system. So if you try to deploy Zero Trust in this 5-step method, you will most likely be successful. If you try to do it in another way, you will probably not be successful. And in fact, one thing to your listeners and the viewers here, probably the number one thing that I see go wrong is people try to look at Zero Trust and do it all at once for their entire organization. And that will never be successful. It's just not possible.
Great. So 5-step methodology is crystal clear then.
Good.
Now, go back. Let's go to the segmentation part. Beaucoup de partenaires et de clients avec lesquels nous échangeons, ils envisagent la segmentation. Mais tous ne l'associent pas à une stratégie de Zero Trust. Quel va être le rôle de la segmentation dans le Zero Trust? So a lot of partners and customers we talk to are considering segmentation or micro-segmentation, but not all of them are linking it to a Zero Trust strategy. What is, according to you, the role of segmentation in Zero Trust?
Well, segmentation is a key focus in Zero Trust. I've been talking about it for a long time. The second report I ever wrote was called Build Security into Your Network's DNA, the Zero Trust Network Architecture. That was in November of 2010, so 14 years ago as we're talking, right? And so in that report, I said this: new ways of segmenting networks must be created because all future networks need to be segmented by default. And this was 3 years before Illumio was even founded as a company. But I knew that segmentation was the key thing to start building your Zero Trust environment on. So Zero Trust defines the proper way to do network segmentation. It defines why you're doing it. A lot of people, I'll ask them, why are you segmenting your network? Well, I had an audit finding that told me that I needed to do segmentation. And I will say, no. That's the compelling event that's going to force you to do it. But the only reason to segment a network, the only reason, is to protect something. And that's why we always start with our protect surface. So in the example on the screen, we're going to do a cardholder data environment for PCI. Now, I'm a former QSA, I've done a lot of PCI work, so I often use that as an example because most companies have some kind of PCI requirement, and PCI is the same for every company in the world who takes credit cards, and it doesn't matter how big or how small they are, it's the same everywhere in the world, so it's a good one to use. And so now we know why we are segmenting. You know, I was in London a while back, and I was with the CIO of one of the world's largest financial institutions. And he stopped me at this point in my presentation. He said to his team, he said, I see why our 3-year, £2 million segmentation project failed. It failed because we didn't even know why we were doing it. We were doing it because somebody told us to buy this product and deploy it and do all these things, but we didn't really know why we were doing it. We didn't have the concept of protecting something. So now that I understand the protect surface, I can take what's known as a segmentation gateway, a gateway that segments networks based upon the DAS elements and the rules that we need to, and connect it to the protect surface to protect a DAS element, in this case PCI. So Illumio technology serves that function that I call a segmentation gateway that I created in that report, Build Security into Networks DNA. And by understanding this, we can then create that micro perimeter just like the Secret Service does. That micro perimeter is created through segmentation technology. And this tells us how we're enforcing that segmentation. We have to understand the way we're doing the enforcement, not just, there's a lot of mythologies around segmentation, but we have to do it in a very specific way so that we have the right policies that allow the right things to have access to the right resources at the right time. And once we add centralized management, this is as close as I can get you to a reference architecture for Zero Trust. The cool thing about Zero Trust is that it doesn't care where the protect surface is located. It works the same way, whether it's on a server in a data center, whether it's in a public cloud, or whether it's on an endpoint, a laptop or a desktop PC. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care. It's not dependent upon location. And this makes Zero Trust 3 things in terms of how we build it out. We build it out one protect surface at a time, so it becomes incremental. We're doing it one at a time. It becomes iterative. We're doing it one after another, and it becomes non-disruptive. The most you can screw up at any one time is one protect surface, right? So, hey, you got a problem, you back out, you reset it, and no harm, no foul. I don't know, do they have that term in French?
Yeah, we have the equivalent.
Do you have the equivalent? Right. So no harm, no foul. You know, in street basketball in the U.S., if you're not bleeding, that wasn't a foul, right? So this is an easy way for people to do it. You just do it one at a time. Don't try to do it all at once. Do it one protect surface at a time based upon the sensitivity of that protect surface.
Okay. Okay, good. And now let's make the link with Illumio. Vous avez évoqué le Zero Trust et la segmentation, et le fait que le Zero Trust définit la segmentation du réseau. Et ça fait d'ailleurs d'Illumio un acteur majeur dans ce domaine. Et dans quel sens pourrait-on dire que Illumio va rendre le Zero Trust facile à utiliser? So, we talked about Zero Trust, segmentation, and the fact that Zero Trust is defining segmentation, network segmentation. This is enlightening Illumio as a major player in this field. In what sense would you say that Illumio makes Zero Trust easy to consume?
Yeah, so this is the key thing of why I chose to come here, right? I mean, I go to companies to achieve specific parts of the long-term mission of Zero Trust, and moving the narrative from identity focus to segmentation focus is the big reason that I came to Illumio. But the key technology that we have gives us visibility into what's happening. So the image you're seeing on screen here is one of our maps, and it's just the main way in which you can consume the information from Illumio. But if you look kind of in the center of that image, you'll see that it says point of sale. Well, so we see there's a point of sale application. Well, this tells us something. We have a point of sale system, we must have PCI data, right? Yeah. And then we see inside there, it tells us there's a database. It shows us the database because it understands that there's probably a SQL connection there. So a SQL connection means database, so we're getting all this information. Well, that database is where the PCI data is. So now we understand the DAS element that we're protecting, right? We understand the protect surface. So now we've got step one. Secondly, we're then mapping the transaction flows. We're seeing how everything works together as a system. So we can see, oh yeah, okay, now I know that I got to protect that. Here are the things that are connecting it. And so we're beginning to build the architecture, which is step three, just by deploying the VEN, virtual enforcement node, to the endpoint. We've started the process of architecture. So we can use it in what's called visibility mode, and then we can move it to enforcement mode later. And in this image, we can see that we're beginning the enforcement mode. So you can see some green lines. Those are connections that we've allowed. Those are an allow rule. And then we see some red lines, and those are connections that are trying to happen, but we're not allowing them. We're denying them. They're just being blocked by default. And then you're seeing some orange lines or yellow lines, and those lines are things that we need to look at it a little bit differently. So in just this one image, I am seeing steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 right in this one image. I mean, it's pretty magical to see that, you know, coming from where I came from, when the early days, I had to have consultants come in and do all of this mapping by hand, by interviewing people, and then we would draw Visio diagrams, and you know, it was several weeks or sometimes a month or two to get to this level of visibility, and then it was only an approximation of it. Now, with technology, we can automate that and see exactly what we need to protect, where it works, and what rules are enforced and which rules we should change. And so that's why Zero Trust segmentation from Illumio really makes Zero Trust easy to consume.
Yeah, very close to the methodology you just described.
Yeah.
Indeed. Alors, on va faire un dernier point qui est important pour nos partenaires, les utilisateurs finaux. Certains d'entre eux peuvent se sentir un peu perdus, ne sachant pas par où commencer le parcours, quels sont les différents jalons à considérer. Comment est-ce que vous décririez ce voyage, ce parcours? So one last word that is quite important to our partners and the end users as well. Some of them may feel kind of lost without knowing exactly where to start, and if there are milestones or what should be the milestones. And how would you describe the journey?
Yeah, so where do you start? I mean, that's a big question, and I understand that. And so I was doing a project for the U.S. military in the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And I was describing how I do this, and they said, draw it. And there's an old joke in the military, come with crayons, draw everything. And so they said, draw it. And I'm so thankful they did. So I created the thing called the Zero Trust Learning Curve. And you can see it here on the screen where we're looking at the sensitivity or criticality of each protect surface over the time on the Zero Trust journey. And this creates what I call the learning curve, where we look at everything on a per protect surface. So early on, we're going to focus on what I call learning protect surfaces. These are things that have low sensitivity. We're very early in the journey. We haven't learned very much about Zero Trust yet. But if we make a mistake, again, no harm, no foul. You have to learn how to do something new, right? I use the example when I'm in Europe of playing soccer. I don't know anything about soccer. I watch a soccer match and I go, oh, there's not much scoring going on. I'm used to basketball, 98 versus 95. And I was, in fact, the last time I was in Paris, I walked into my hotel. And as I walked in, everybody stood up and started clapping. And I'm like, oh, wow, they're happy to see me. But no, there had been a good play on the soccer match that everybody was gathered around watching. And so I said to one of the workers at the hotel, I said, oh, how's the game going? And he says, oh, it's a great game. Great game. I'm like, okay, well, what's the score? 0-0. How can it be a great game if it's 0-0, right? So I don't know anything about it. So if you said, okay, we're going to go play soccer, you'd have to teach me the rules. You'd have to help me understand why. I'm like Ted Lasso when he goes in and he says, if you've watched Ted Lasso on TV, the sitcom, and he yells at the ref, offsides, offsides, you call that offsides? And the ref is like, yes. And he says, no, I'm asking, I'm trying to learn, right? What's offsides? And so that's how you learn, right? You learn by being in that experiential moment. And so once you've learned, then you can focus on some things that are a little bit more sensitive, but still not mission critical. And those are called practice protect surfaces because you get to Zero Trust and Carnegie Hall the same way. You practice, practice, practice. And after that, then you can focus on the crown jewels, keys of the kingdom, high value assets, whatever you call them. There's probably some very elegant French word for that, isn't there? Well,
Sure.
What's the French word for the crown jewels?
Les joyaux de la couronne. It's the translation.
Okay, so you say it so much nicer than we do in English, but so much more elegantly. But now you know what to protect, right? I always argue against starting with the crown jewels because you can make mistakes there if you haven't ever done it before. And that's why I try to use a sports metaphor or analogy, because we all know that, I don't want to go in and play in the World Cup the first day I've ever put on soccer shoes, whatever soccer shoes people wear for soccer. I don't know. Soccer was not a big game when I was growing up. We played football, which is a game you play with your hands in America with an oblong ball. You guys play soccer with your feet. See, you haven't quite figured it out yet, but I'll give you some grace. And then after that, you'll focus on some things that are a little less sensitive. I call them secondary and tertiary protect surfaces. And in fact, you can say, hey, those tertiary protect surfaces, they're not very important. They're protected as much as they need. So I'm going to take that as my threshold and say anything below that level of sensitivity doesn't need to be protected in a zero trust manner. The key thing is you don't have to do it for everything, just the important things, right? Like my house. I have an alarm system. I have security cameras. I have all that stuff. I live in Texas, so I have some other security controls, that you don't have here.
Yeah.
But I don't protect my garage the same way because, quite frankly, you want to steal some trash out of my garage. My garage is full of moving boxes because I'm moving into a new house. You want to come in and steal that? Great, take them away, right? So yes. Understand that the things that that have low value don't need to be protected in the same way.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you very much, John, for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Love being back in Paris. It's my first time in a number of years because of COVID and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so just getting my feet underwater. Trying to remember what little French I remember. So, merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.